There is a moment that lives in every person's life where everything they believe to be true shatters like glass dropped on concrete. For me, that moment came on a Thursday evening in October, standing in the driveway of the house I grew up in, watching my father's face twist into something I had never seen before. Not anger exactly, but disgust. Pure, undisguised disgust aimed directly at me, his only son, the child who had spent 23 years trying to make him proud. I can still feel the cold of that autumn wind cutting through my thin jacket. I can still hear my mother's voice from inside the house, not defending me, not calling my father back inside to calm down, but instead yelling at me to leave and never come back. I remember my younger sister Tanya watching from the upstairs window, her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips, like she was enjoying a show she had been waiting years to see. That was the night my family disowned me over money I never stole, over lies I never told, and over a crime I never committed. That was the night I lost everything. But what they did not know, what none of them could have predicted, was that losing everything would be the very thing that set me free. And freedom, real freedom, has a way of coming back around with interest. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand just how deep this betrayal cut. My name is Marcus Cole, and I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Birmingham, England. My father, Gregory Cole, worked as a foreman at a manufacturing plant for over 30 years. My mother, Diane, was a homemaker who occasionally did bookkeeping for small businesses in the area to bring in extra money. We were not wealthy by any stretch, but we had enough. We had a roof over our heads, food on the table, and what I believed was a family that loved each other. I was the oldest of 3 children. After me came my brother Derek, who was 2 years younger, and then our baby sister Tanya, who was 5 years younger than me. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the one who helped with chores without being asked, the one who got decent grades, the one who worked part-time jobs starting at 16 to help pay for my own school supplies and clothes. I never asked my parents for much because I could see how hard they worked, and I did not want to add to their burden. Derek was different. He was charming, funny, the kind of person who could talk his way out of any situation. Teachers loved him. Neighbors loved him. Our parents adored him in a way that was hard to miss. Whenever something went wrong, Derek had an excuse ready, and somehow it was always believed. Tanya was the princess of the family, spoiled in ways that I tried not to resent. She got the newest clothes, the dance lessons, the bedroom makeover when she turned 13, while Derek and I shared a cramped room until I moved out. But I never complained. I told myself that was just how families worked. Some children needed more attention than others, and as the eldest, it was my job to understand that. When I was 18, something happened that would change the trajectory of my entire life, though I did not recognize it at the time. My grandmother on my father's side, a woman named Eunice Cole, passed away after a long battle with illness. She was the only person in my family who truly saw me. She would call me on weekends just to ask how I was doing, not how school was going, or whether I was helping around the house, but genuinely how I was feeling. She noticed things no one else did. The way I sometimes looked tired, the way I deflected compliments, the way I carried myself like I was trying to take up as little space as possible. A few months before she died, she gave me her wedding ring. It was a simple platinum band that her husband, my grandfather, had given her over 50 years earlier. She pressed it into my palm one afternoon when we were alone and told me to keep it safe. She said it was not valuable in terms of money, but it held the love of a lifetime in its metal. She told me I reminded her of my grandfather, steady, dependable, the kind of man who would weather any storm without losing himself. I wore that ring on my right hand from that day forward. I still wear it now. When my grandmother passed, she left behind a small estate, a modest house that had been paid off decades ago, some savings, and a few personal possessions. No one expected much from her will. She had always lived simply, but when the will was read, everything changed. My grandmother had left me her house, not my father, not split between the grandchildren, just me. She had written a letter explaining that she wanted me to have a foundation, a starting point for building my own life. She said she had watched me work harder than anyone else in the family and received the least recognition for it. She wanted to correct that imbalance in her own small way. I was stunned. I was grateful. I was also terrified because I saw the look on my father's face when the solicitor read those words aloud. It was the first time I ever saw my father look at me with something close to hatred. My mother immediately began crying, saying it was not fair, that she and my father had been the ones to care for Grandma Eunice in her final years, not me. That was partially true. They had visited her more often than I could, because I was working 2 jobs at the time while trying to save money for university. But I had called her every single week. I had sent her letters. I had told her I loved her in ways that perhaps my parents had forgotten to do. Still, I tried to make peace. I told my parents I would sell the house and split the money with the family. It seemed like the right thing to do. I did not want an inheritance to tear us apart. My father refused. He said if I was going to sell it, the money should go entirely to him and my mother, since they had sacrificed so much raising me. He said I owed them. I remember standing there, barely 19 years old, being told that my grandmother's final gift to me was something I owed to people who had never once thanked me for anything I had contributed to the household. Still, I wanted to keep the peace. I agreed to give them 70% of the sale. They demanded 90%. I hesitated, and that hesitation was apparently unforgivable. Over the next 4 years, something shifted in my family. It was subtle at first. My mother stopped calling me on my birthday. My father started making snide remarks whenever I visited about how some people think they are better than where they came from. Derek, who had always been friendly with me despite our differences, started keeping his distance. Tanya outright ignored me at family gatherings. I kept trying. I kept showing up for holidays. I kept bringing gifts. I kept pretending everything was fine, but nothing I did was ever enough. Eventually, I sold my grandmother's house. The market had improved, and I got a decent price for it. I gave my parents 80% of the proceeds, keeping only enough to pay off some debts, and put a small deposit on a rental flat in London where I was trying to start fresh. I thought this would finally satisfy them. I thought we could move forward. Instead, my father took the check and said it was about time I did the right thing. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just a statement that I had finally met my obligation. That was the beginning of the end, though I did not know it yet. Fast forward to when I was 23. I had been working at a financial consulting firm in London for about a year. I was not making incredible money, but I was building a career. I was learning everything I could about investing, markets, and wealth management. I wanted to understand how money worked, so I could never be controlled by the lack of it again. One weekend, I went home to Birmingham for my mother's birthday. It was supposed to be a simple visit. Dinner with the family, cake, some forced conversation, and then back to London. When I arrived, the atmosphere was strange. My father barely looked at me. My mother hugged me, but it felt performative. Derek was on his phone the entire time. Tanya kept whispering with my mother in the kitchen. After dinner, my father asked me to come outside. He said we needed to talk. I followed him to the driveway, expecting maybe an apology for how cold things had been. Instead, he accused me of stealing £50,000 from the family. I was so shocked I could not even respond at first. £50,000. That was more money than I had ever had in my life at one time. I asked him what he was talking about, and he explained that for years, my grandmother had apparently been setting aside money in a separate account. This account was discovered recently during some estate reconciliation by a distant relative who worked in banking. The account had held £50,000, and according to my father, I must have somehow accessed it before anyone else knew about it. I told him that was insane. I had no knowledge of any secret account. I had received only what was stated in the will. He did not believe me. What happened next felt like a carefully choreographed attack. My mother came outside, tears streaming down her face, calling me a thief. Derek followed, shaking his head with disappointment like he had always known I was capable of something like this. Tanya stood at the door and said she always thought I was selfish. I tried to defend myself. I asked for proof. I asked to see documents. I demanded to know who told them this and where they got their information. My father said the proof was obvious. I was the one who received the house. I was the one Grandma Eunice favored. I must have manipulated her in her final days to get access to everything. He told me I was no longer welcome in their home. He told me I was no longer his son. My mother did not contradict him. She just stood there crying as if she was the victim in all of this. I left that night with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart so shattered I could barely breathe. I drove back to London in a daze, replaying every moment, trying to understand what had just happened. There had to be a mistake. There had to be some way to prove my innocence. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I realized something terrible. My family did not want proof. They did not want the truth. They wanted someone to blame for their own financial struggles, and I had always been the easiest target. The months following my disownment were the darkest of my life. I threw myself into my work because it was the only thing I could control. I stopped eating properly. I stopped sleeping well. I isolated myself from everyone because the shame of what had happened was too heavy to share. I kept thinking that eventually someone in my family would reach out. Someone would apologize. Someone would admit they had made a mistake. But the silence was absolute. No calls, no messages, not even a card at Christmas. It was as if I had never existed. During this time, I started doing my own investigation. I needed to understand where this accusation had come from. I contacted the solicitor who had handled my grandmother's estate and asked about any additional accounts. He confirmed that there had been no mention of any secret funds during the probate process. Everything that was documented had been distributed according to the will. I asked him to dig deeper. He eventually discovered something that made my blood run cold. There had been an account. It was not in my grandmother's name exactly, but in a trust she had set up years before her death. The beneficiary of that trust was listed as my father, Gregory Cole. The £50,000 had been released to him approximately 6 months after her passing. My father had received the money, not me. He had received it directly into an account that only he had access to. And instead of telling the family or acknowledging it, he had blamed me. I want you to understand the weight of that revelation. My own father had stolen from his mother's estate, hidden the money, and then used the existence of that money to frame me as a thief. He had turned my entire family against me based on a lie he himself had created. Why? That question haunted me for weeks. And the answer, when it finally became clear, was almost too painful to accept. My father had gambled. For years, apparently. It was something he had kept hidden from my mother and the rest of the family. He had debts, serious debts. When that £50,000 came through, he used it to pay off those debts instead of doing the right thing. But the guilt of what he had done must have eaten at him. And rather than confess, rather than face the consequences of his own actions, he found it easier to sacrifice me, his eldest son, the one who had never asked for anything, the one who had always tried to keep the peace. I was expendable to him. Armed with this knowledge, I had a choice to make. I could confront my father directly. I could send the evidence to my mother and siblings. I could try once again to prove my innocence and beg for forgiveness I did not even need to ask for. Or I could take a different path. I chose the different path. Not because I wanted revenge in some petty, destructive sense, but because I realized something important during those dark months of isolation. My family had shown me exactly who they were. They had chosen to believe the worst about me without evidence. They had discarded me without hesitation. Even if I proved my innocence today, what would that change? They would never truly trust me again. They would always look at me with suspicion. The relationship I thought we had was never real to begin with. I was just a supporting character in their story, useful when needed and disposable when convenient. So instead of begging for a place back at their table, I decided to build my own table. I decided to become so successful, so undeniably accomplished, that my absence from their lives would become their greatest regret. And I decided that when the time was right, when I had built myself up from the ashes they left me in, I would return. Not to destroy them, but to show them the truth, to give them consequences, to let karma do what karma does. The next 10 years of my life were defined by relentless work and unwavering focus. I saved every penny I could from my consulting job. I studied investment strategies on my own time. I took online courses in real estate development. I networked obsessively, going to every industry event I could find, introducing myself to anyone who might be able to teach me something. Within 2 years, I had enough saved to make my first small property investment, a rundown flat in a developing area of East London. I spent weekends renovating it myself, learning plumbing and electrical work from YouTube videos and library books. I sold it for a modest profit and immediately reinvested in another property, then another, then another. By the time I was 28, I owned 6 rental properties generating passive income. By 30, I had started my own real estate development company. By 32, I had expanded into commercial properties and had a team of 15 employees. The business was valued at several £1,000,000. During this time, I kept loose tabs on my family through mutual acquaintances and occasional social media searches. What I learned was both predictable and infuriating. Derek had gotten married, had 2 children, and was working a mid-level job that seemed to make him neither happy nor successful. Tanya had followed a similar path, married young to a man who apparently spent more time at the pub than at home. My mother had developed health issues. My father had retired early due to what was described as stress-related problems. They were not thriving, they were surviving, and not once in 10 years did any of them reach out to me, not to apologize, not to check if I was even alive. It was as if the moment they cast me out, I ceased to exist entirely. But I existed. I existed more fully than I ever had before. I was healthy. I was successful. I had built genuine friendships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I had even started dating again, cautiously, learning to trust after years of having that trust violated. Life was good, better than good. It was everything I had ever dreamed it could be. And yet there was still a weight I carried. Not a weight of anger exactly, though that was there too. It was more like unfinished business. A story that had never been given its proper ending. I knew that one day I would have to go back. I would have to face them. I would have to show them who I had become and reveal the truth about what my father had done. Not for their sake, for mine. Because closure is not something anyone can give you. It is something you have to take for yourself. The opportunity came unexpectedly when I was 33. A business contact mentioned a property development opportunity in Birmingham, a large mixed-use project that would involve residential units, retail spaces, and community facilities. The location was in a part of the city that was undergoing significant regeneration. The potential returns were substantial, but the real draw for me was something else entirely. The development site was less than 2 miles from the neighborhood where I grew up, where my parents still lived, where my siblings still gathered for holidays and birthdays, pretending their family was complete when one chair had been empty for a decade. I took the project. I threw myself into it with an intensity that surprised even my team. This was not just a business venture for me, it was a statement, a monument to everything I had built from nothing. A physical reminder to anyone who had ever doubted me that I had risen higher than they ever imagined possible. The development took 18 months to complete. When it was finished, it was the most significant project of my career. Modern apartments, thriving retail units, a community center that would serve families in the area for generations. And my name was on it. Not prominently, because I am not someone who needs to see his name in lights. But it was there for anyone who cared to look. Marcus Cole, lead developer. 1 month after the grand opening, I drove to my parents' neighborhood. It was a Sunday afternoon, quiet, the kind of day when families gather for roast dinners and lazy conversations. I parked across the street from the house I grew up in and sat there for a long time, just looking. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The garden was less maintained. There was a heaviness to the whole place, like the structure itself was tired. After about an hour, I saw Derek's car pull into the driveway, then Tanya's. They were gathering for one of their family dinners, the ones I was never invited to, the ones that happened as if I had never been part of the family at all. I waited another 30 minutes, then got out of my car. I was wearing one of my best suits, not to show off, but because I needed the armor. I needed to feel put together when facing the people who had torn me apart. I walked up the driveway. I knocked on the door. My mother answered. She was older, of course. Her hair had gone gray. Her face had new lines, but her eyes were the same. And the moment they landed on me, I saw something flash through them. Recognition, shock, fear. She did not say anything for what felt like an eternity. Then she called over her shoulder in a voice that was almost a whisper, "Gregory, come here." My father appeared behind her. He had aged significantly. His broad shoulders were now stooped. His powerful hands trembled slightly. He looked like a man who had been fighting a battle for years and was losing. When he saw me, his face went pale. Still, he found his voice. "What are you doing here?" I kept my tone calm, even. "I am here because I think it is time we all had an honest conversation." He started to close the door, but Derek appeared behind him and said, "Wait." Derek looked genuinely confused. He did not look at me with the contempt I expected. He looked at me with something closer to curiosity, maybe even concern. "Let him in," Derek said quietly. "He came all this way." My father hesitated, then stepped aside. I walked into the house for the first time in 10 years. They gathered in the living room. My mother sat on the sofa, clutching a tissue. My father stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. Tanya sat in the corner with her phone in hand, though for once she was not looking at it. Derek sat on the arm of a chair, watching me with that same unreadable expression. I remained standing. I had no intention of getting comfortable. "There is something you all need to know," I began. "Something you should have known a long time ago, but you were too quick to believe the worst about me to ever ask for the truth." My father's voice was gruff. "We know the truth. You stole from this family." I shook my head slowly. "That is the version of events you told yourselves. It is not what actually happened." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the documents I had obtained years ago. Bank records showing the trust account, statements showing the withdrawal into my father's personal account, a timeline proving that the money had been accessed months after my grandmother's death, at a time when I had no legal authority or access to any of her accounts. I placed the folder on the coffee table. "For years, you blamed me for stealing £50,000, money I never touched, money I never even knew existed. But someone did touch it, someone did withdraw it, and that someone is standing in this room right now." My father's face went from pale to red. He started to speak, but no words came out. My mother picked up the folder with trembling hands. As she flipped through the pages, her expression shifted from confusion to horror. She looked at my father. "Gregory, what is this?" He said nothing. His silence was the loudest admission of guilt I had ever heard. I continued, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Dad had gambling debts, serious ones. When Grandma's trust money became available, he took it to pay off those debts. And when questions started being asked about where that money went, he blamed me, the one family member who was already considered the outsider, the one whose absence would cause the least disruption. I was a convenient scapegoat. Nothing more. Derek spoke first. He stood up slowly, staring at our father with a look I had never seen on his face before. Genuine betrayal. Dad, tell me this is not true. Tell me you did not do this. My father's voice cracked when he finally spoke. You do not understand the pressure I was under, the debts, the people I owed. They would have destroyed this family. I did what I had to do. Derek's voice rose. You destroyed your own son. You threw Marcus out like garbage. For 10 years. For 10 years, we thought he was a thief. We thought he was the problem. And it was you the whole time? Tanya looked up from her phone for what might have been the first time in years. She looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. It might have been guilt. It might have been something else. She did not say anything, but she did not look away either. My mother was crying now. Full, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She kept saying I did not know over and over again, as if those words could undo a decade of silence and complicity. I let them sit with it. I let the weight of the truth press down on all of them. Then I spoke again. I did not come here for an apology. Apologies will not give me back the years I lost. They will not undo the nights I spent wondering what I did wrong, why my own family could throw me away so easily. I came here because the truth deserves to be spoken, and because I wanted you to see what you missed. I looked around the room at each of them. I wanted you to know that the son you discarded, the brother you forgot, did not crumble. I built a life, a successful life, a meaningful life. I own a company now, properties across the country. I have employees who depend on me, clients who trust me, friends who actually care about me. I am not telling you this to boast. I am telling you so you understand that your rejection did not define me. It freed me. My mother looked up through her tears. Marcus, please. We can fix this. We can be a family again. I shook my head. That is not why I am here. And honestly, I do not know if that is even possible. A family is built on trust, on honesty, on showing up for each other. None of you did that for me, not when it mattered. I do not hate you, but I also do not need you. Not anymore. Derek stepped forward. He looked like he was struggling with something internally. Finally, he spoke. I am sorry. I know that means nothing right now, but I am genuinely sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed back on what we were told. I just believed what Mom and Dad said, and I should not have. He paused, running a hand over his face. I was a coward. I looked at my brother for a long moment. We had never been close, not really. He had always been the favored one, the charming one, the one who skated through life on smiles and good timing. But in this moment, he looked genuinely broken. That is a start, I said quietly. It does not fix anything, but it is a start. Tanya finally spoke, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. I did not hate you, Marcus. I did not want to be on the wrong side of things. I was 16 when you left. I did not know what to believe. I turned to her. You were old enough to ask questions. You were old enough to reach out at any point over the last decade. You chose not to. That was your choice. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. You are right. I know you are right. My father had not moved from his spot by the window. His arms were no longer crossed. They hung at his sides, limp, defeated. He looked like a man watching his entire life collapse in real time. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought the accusations would just go away. I thought you would fight back harder. When you did not, I assumed it meant you were guilty. I nearly laughed. Fight back harder? You cut me off completely. You turned everyone I loved against me. How was I supposed to fight back when I was fighting alone? He shook his head slowly. I know it was wrong, but I could not admit what I had done. The shame would have destroyed your mother, would have destroyed this family. I stared at him. The family was already destroyed, Dad. You just did not notice because I was the only piece missing. And you convinced yourself that piece did not matter. The room fell silent. Nobody seemed to know what to say next. The truth hung in the air like a heavy fog, impossible to ignore, impossible to disperse. I picked up the folder from the coffee table. I am not here to prosecute you, I said, looking at my father. I am not going to take legal action, though I would be well within my rights to do so. What you did was fraud. It was defamation. It was emotional abuse. But taking you to court would not give me what I actually want. My father looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes that made me sick. What do you want? I want you to live with this, I said simply. I want you to wake up every day knowing what you did to your own son. I want you to see my success from a distance and know you had no part in it. I want you to sit at this dinner table every Sunday and feel the empty chair where I should have been. That is my justice, not revenge. Consequence. I turned to leave, but Derek's voice stopped me. Can we at least try to, I do not know, rebuild something? I paused at the door. Maybe, someday, but not now. Right now, I need to process everything that just happened here, and you all need to figure out how to live with the truth. Derek nodded slowly, accepting what I was saying even if he did not like it. I opened the door and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the neighborhood I had once called home. I walked back to my car with a feeling I had not experienced in years. Lightness. The weight I had been carrying for so long was finally beginning to lift. Not because I had destroyed my family or gotten some dramatic revenge, but because I had spoken my truth. I had faced the people who hurt me and shown them exactly who I had become. I had proven that their betrayal, as devastating as it was, had not broken me. It had made me. I drove back to London that night. The next morning, I went to work like any other day. I met with clients. I reviewed proposals. I checked in with my team. Life continued, as it always does. But something had shifted inside me. The chapter that had been open for so long was finally closed. I did not know if my family would ever truly change. I did not know if my father would ever genuinely confront his own actions or just find new ways to justify them. I did not know if my mother would stop seeing herself as the victim or if my siblings would actually do the work of rebuilding a relationship with me. Those were questions for the future, questions I no longer felt obligated to answer. About 3 months after my visit, Derek reached out. Just a text at first. Simple, careful, asking how I was doing. I responded cautiously. We exchanged a few messages over the following weeks. Nothing heavy, just surface-level conversation. But it was something. Tanya reached out a few weeks after that. Her message was longer, more apologetic. She said she had been going to therapy and had started unpacking a lot of the family dynamics that she had never questioned before. She said she was ashamed of how she had treated me and wanted me to know that she was genuinely trying to become a better person. I appreciated the sentiment, even if I was not ready to fully trust it. My mother sent a letter, a handwritten letter, sent to my office because she did not have my home address. It was long and rambling and full of regret. She said she had not known about my father's gambling. She said she felt like a fool for believing his version of events without question. She said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again, but she wanted me to know that she loved me and always had, even when her actions did not show it. I read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer. I was not ready to respond. Maybe I never would be. But I kept it, because some part of me needed to know it existed. My father never reached out. Not a call, not a text, not a letter. I do not know if it was pride or shame or simply not knowing what to say. Maybe it was all three. I decided I could live with his silence. After all, I had lived with it for 10 years. What was a few more? 6 months after my visit to Birmingham, something unexpected happened. A journalist from a local newspaper contacted my office, asking if I would be interested in doing a feature story on my real estate development project. The community center portion had been particularly successful. offering programs for young people and job training for adults. It had become a real point of pride for the neighborhood. I agreed to the interview, though I was hesitant about too much personal exposure. During the interview, the journalist asked about my background, where I came from, what drove me to succeed. I gave the standard answers at first: hard work, determination, learning from failures. But then she asked a more pointed question. She said she had done some research and noticed I had grown up in Birmingham, but seemed to have no public connection to any family there. She asked if there was a story there. I could have deflected. I could have said it was private. But something made me decide to be honest. I told her an abbreviated version of the truth. I told her that I had been estranged from my family for many years due to a misunderstanding that was based on false accusations. I told her that I had used that pain as motivation to build something meaningful. I told her that sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most, and the only response is to keep moving forward. The journalist seemed moved by my candor. She asked if I would be willing to share more details for the story. I declined, saying the specifics were too personal, but I gave her permission to write about the general arc, the idea that success can emerge from even the darkest circumstances. When the article was published, it generated more attention than I expected, not just locally, but nationally. Other outlets picked up the story. I was invited to speak at business conferences about resilience and entrepreneurship. I was contacted by publishers interested in a potential book deal. The narrative of the self-made man who overcame family betrayal resonated with people in ways I had not anticipated. For the first time, I realized that my story might have value beyond my own healing. It might help others who had experienced similar betrayals. It might show them that being cut off by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally does not have to be the end. It can be a beginning. About a year after the article was published, I received a message through my company's website. It was from my father. I do not know how he found it or what prompted him to reach out after so long. The message was brief. It said he had seen the articles about me and my success. It said he was proud of what I had accomplished, even if he had no right to be. It said he knew he could never undo what he had done, but he wanted me to know that not a day went by that he did not think about it. He ended the message by saying he was sick, some kind of lung condition. The doctors were not optimistic about his prognosis. He was not asking for anything, he said. Not forgiveness, not a visit. He just wanted me to know. I sat with that message for a long time, days, weeks. I talked to my therapist about it. I talked to close friends. I wrestled with what, if anything, I was supposed to do with this information. The man who had ruined my relationship with my entire family, who had framed me for theft to cover his own sins, who had let me spend 10 years in exile without ever reaching out to make things right, was now dying and wanted me to know he thought about me. Part of me felt nothing. He had forfeited his right to my empathy a long time ago. But another part of me, a small part that I could not fully silence, felt something more complicated. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. Understanding that people are flawed, that they make terrible choices under pressure, that they rationalize and justify and protect their own egos in ways that destroy the people around them. It does not make it right, but it makes it human. I did not respond to the message. I was not ready. I did not know if I ever would be. But I kept it, just like I kept my mother's letter, just in case. Another year passed. My company continued to grow. I expanded into international markets. I brought on new partners. I was featured in business magazines as an example of success against the odds. I was living a life that the 23-year-old who had been thrown out of his family home could never have imagined. I was living proof that the people who try to break you do not get to determine your value. I received another message, this one from Derek. Our father had passed away. The funeral was in 3 days. Derek said he understood if I did not want to come. He said there would be no pressure, no expectations, but he wanted me to know, in case I wanted to pay my respects or simply be there for closure. I thought about it for a full day. I spoke to my therapist again. I spoke to my closest friends. And in the end, I decided to go. Not for my father. Not really. For myself. Because there are moments in life where you have to show up, even when it hurts. Even when the person being buried is someone who caused you immeasurable pain. You show up because it is part of writing the final chapter. Part of claiming your own narrative. The funeral was small. Immediate family and a handful of old colleagues from my father's workplace. I sat in the back, apart from everyone else. My mother saw me when she walked in. Her face crumpled, but she did not approach. Derek nodded at me from across the room. Tanya did the same. I stayed for the service. I listened to people say kind things about a man who had not been kind to me. I watched my mother weep for the husband who had lied to her for decades. I felt the strange duality of grief and detachment that comes when you are mourning someone who stopped being your family long before they stopped breathing. After the service, Derek approached me outside the church. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. He thanked me for coming. He said it meant a lot to everyone that I had shown up. I nodded, but did not say much. What was there to say? Tanya came next. She hugged me, which caught me off guard. It was a real hug, not a performative one. She whispered, "I am sorry," into my shoulder, and then stepped back, wiping her eyes. My mother came last. She stood in front of me for a long moment, just looking at my face like she was trying to memorize it. Then she said something I will never forget. She said, "I failed you. I know I failed you. But I am so proud of who you became anyway. And I am so sorry I was not part of it." I did not cry. I had done my crying years ago. But I let her words land. I let them sit inside me and find whatever place they were meant to occupy. Then I said, "Thank you for saying that." And I left. I did not stay for the reception. I did not have any long conversations or make any promises about the future. I simply left Birmingham and drove back to London, back to my life, back to everything I had built. And somewhere along the way, I realized that I had finally gotten what I had been searching for all along. Not revenge, not vindication, not even an apology, though those words from my mother had meant something. What I had gotten was something simpler and more profound. I had gotten my story back. The story my father tried to rewrite. The story my family tried to bury. I had taken it back, one decision at a time, one accomplishment at a time, one truth at a time. And now that story was complete. I am telling you all of this because I want you to know that betrayal by the people closest to you is survivable. It does not feel survivable when it is happening. It feels like the end of everything. But it is not. It is a beginning disguised as an ending. The people who discard you are not the people who define you. The lies told about you are not the truth of who you are. And the wealth, the success, the life you build after they have tried to destroy you, that is not just material gain. It is proof of concept. Proof that you were always worth more than they were willing to see. My family disowned me over money I never touched. They cast me out based on a lie told by the one person who was supposed to protect me. And for 10 years, I carried that weight in silence. But I also used that weight. I let it fuel me. I let it push me towards something greater. And when I finally came back, I came back not for revenge, but for closure. I came back rich, yes. But more importantly, I came back whole. If you are going through something similar, if the people who were supposed to love you have betrayed you instead, I want you to know this. Their rejection is not your ending. Their lies are not your truth. Their inability to see your value does not diminish your worth. You have the power to write your own story. And the best revenge, the only revenge that truly matters, is becoming someone they cannot ignore. Someone they will always regret losing. Someone who proves, simply by existing and thriving, that they were wrong about you all along. That is my story. That is how my family disowned me for money, and how I came back, not just richer, but free.